parents! This is Mrs. White here to give you a little overview of Iowa Core 101. We are just going to talk a little bit about the what and the why behind the Iowa Core. I've had a lot of great questions and I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. But please know that you can always give me a call, shoot me an email, or stop in and see me and we can talk more if this doesn't help answer your questions. So we're going to start a little bit with the what behind Iowa Core standards. So let's just talk about what they do. So standards are there to let teachers know, what students should be able to know and do in kindergarten through 12th grade. So it sets out those standards in math, science, English and language arts, and social studies that tells teachers what are we supposed to be teaching and what do students need to know to be ready for the next grade. There are also some cool new things that you may hear about called 21st century skills, and these include things that students need to be successful in the real world. So financial literacy, how to balance a checkbook, how to have savings, things like technology, how to be using your computer and do presentations, employability skills, which are very important for students to learn how to be a good employee and get a good job. So including things like interviews and being on time, having a conversation that might be going through a conflict and how to do that respectfully. And things like health literacy. So when do you go to the doctor? How do you read a thermometer? How do you know when it's a sprain or strain? All of those good things come before students graduate high school. So we're not going to be teaching kindergartners how to have a job interview, but we're certainly working on that as students get older. So there are a lot of important things that go beyond just what we do in the classroom for math and science and reading. All the way into those skills that we know kids need to be successful after they leave our school setting. So a couple quick notes of what the core is not, and these are kind of as frequent misunderstandings. The core is not a curriculum. So a lot of times we'll hear people say Iowa Core curriculum, and they'll think that it's only one way of saying and doing things that teachers are allowed to teach. And that is a misunderstanding. That's not true. So the Iowa Core does not tell teachers how to teach. It tells us what to teach. So we have great things in our district like Lucy Calkins curriculum and workshop model and Words Their Way and all kinds of other things that we have decided as a district are how we're going to teach these important standards. So the Iowa Core is just what kids need to learn, and then districts still get to decide how we're going to teach it. So it's also not, the Iowa Core is not a set of rules for teachers or students, so we don't get wrist slapped and things if we don't do them. It's just we all agree that these are the things that are important for students to know when they leave our setting. The next question that we often get are, why are they important? Why do we need to have these core standards? So really there are a lot of reasons, and I've listed them all here, but I think one important thing is that it helps teachers and parents work together. So if you know what students are expected to learn and we know we're all on the same page, you can be checking those things at home. You can be knowing what students are doing all day long, because 9 times out of 10, when our kiddos come home from school and we'll say, "What did you learn today?" They're going to say, "Nothing." And I assure you, we are learning lots of things all day at school. Another few important things I'll highlight is that when we have these standards, we really are creating equity for all of our kids throughout the state. So it doesn't matter if your student is here with us in Cedar Falls or all the way over in Council Bluffs or down in Marshalltown. Students should all be learning the same skills in a school year. So a first grader should be learning the same things here as a first grader over in Sioux City. So that really helps so that we don't have these pockets where some students learn some things and some learn others. And then other things is that they help us to know when a student might need a little bit of extra help. Hello? Hello? So why else are those standards important? So I think we talked already about helping us work together and equity for students. And the next thing that I want to talk about is that when we have these standards, it helps us to know when students might be struggling and need a little extra help. It also helps us know when they already have it and we need to be challenging them and developing those skills further. So I'll talk a little bit in a few minutes about what happens when students aren't getting the standards, but I think it's helpful for us to be able to kind of compare who is understanding the material, who's not, what else do we need to do in the classroom to sort of beef that up and make sure that kiddos are getting those extra skills that they need. So the other things are just those critical thinking skills are so important to prepare for college or career or entering the workforce. And then just having those common expectations for districts across the state, again, that equity piece helps us all to be on the same page. And that real world knowledge is really important, not just for after high school, but when students get their first job or when they start to join more clubs and committees as they get older. We really are focusing all the time on that real world piece. And one of the things I feel like we start early and is important is that your digital footprint and how to be safe online and on social media. And I think if it wasn't for those great teachers across the state working together to create our technology literacy standards, we may not be providing those same opportunities for all kids. So there's really a lot of great things going on because of those Iowa Core standards that makes it really critical that everybody is getting access to the same great instruction. So you might be wondering where these standards came from in the first place. So it goes all the way back to 2005, which is when the state first started looking at high school students. So they were realizing that there was a lot of inequity between high schools, and when we were sending students off to college or the workforce, they were going with a lot of different skill sets depending on where you lived in the state. So in 2005, we passed a bill, or not we, but the Department of Ed passed a bill, and asking us all to come together and start looking at how to make high school students have some common expectations. So teams came together from all over the state, AEAs, the Department of Ed, school districts, including teachers and curriculum directors and principals. Everyone was really working together, and they were all just looking at that literacy, math, and science piece. So how do we get everything there squared away for our high school students? Well, then once in 2006, they kind of turned in that first draft, the people up at the DE were like, wow, this is really great. We really need to extend this to include kindergarten through 8th grade students. There really needs to be something along these lines to make sure that all students across Iowa are learning the same things. So they added in K-8, and then they also added in social studies and this cool thing we talked about earlier called 21st century skills. So that was also a critical and new piece that all came in 2007. And then those were presented to the DE in 2008, and the governor was so excited about it, and everybody was pretty much on board that he signed into law a requirement that all public schools and all accredited schools start following these Iowa Core standards so that all schools across Iowa were on the same page as far as what our kiddos were learning every day and what they needed to advance to the next grade level. So if you're wondering for some specific examples about how the core will impact your child, it's really not changing, again, the how of teaching, but the what. So every grade level has a specific set of skills that children should be able to master by the end of that grade level, and that will prepare them to go into the following grade. So for example, these are some of the math things that students have to be able to do at the end of kindergarten to be successful in first grade math. So there's things counting objects and telling how many there are, acting out using objects, addition and subtraction word problems, and or drawing diagrams to represent them. So lots of different ways that students could be solving word problems. Adding with a sum of 10 or less and subtracting from 10 or less. So that's all that single digit, 1 plus 1, 1 plus 2, 1 plus 3, and solving those addition and subtraction word problems. Fluently adding and subtracting within 5. That means that word fluent there just means that they can do it efficiently and quickly without having to stop and think really hard about it. And correctly naming shapes regardless of their orientation or size. So if a square is turned around, it's still a square. If a heart is really giant, it's still a heart. Things like that. So those are all the math. That's an example of the math core standards for kindergartners. Now, some of that might sound pretty rigorous and might sound intense, but know that when they come in on the first day of kindergarten, they will not be working on all of these things. They'll be building on their skills throughout the year so that they can know all of these things by their last day of school in kindergarten. So a question that came up before is what happens if your child is not meeting the standards? So let's say you notice at home that, man, we are just not understanding how to count 1 through 20. We're struggling to get those basic counting and basic number recognition coming. So if your child is struggling with that, their teacher should be talking with you about what types of interventions they've put in place in the classroom. So if they haven't mentioned that to you and you're noticing it at home, then give them a call or shoot them an email or stop in and ask, hey, are they mastering this at school? And can you tell me more about that? Because if they're not mastering it, then we have intervention time. We call it win time in our schools, where we are working and kind of just drilling right on those individual skills that some students are missing. So during that time, and WIN, by the way, stands for what I need, students who aren't getting it, they're getting instruction about how to get it. They're breaking it down into the nitty-gritty. Students who already got it, they're getting some extra practice and some development. Students who had it before we even tested it, those students are doing some extended core things and they are doing some more hands-on and deepening their learning. So that win time isn't just for students who are struggling, it's for all of our kids, and all of our kids need something different. So if your child is still struggling even after interventions, a number of supports or accommodations at school, your child's teacher might be talking with you now about conducting an evaluation for special education services. And that doesn't mean that a student will be pulled out of their school or their classroom most of the time. It means that they might have a special ed teacher who's either coming into their classroom and working on things with them, or your child will be going with another small group of kids who are working on some similar skills to the classroom next door to kind of drill and make sure that we're beefing up that curriculum so that all kids can master the core. So we have special education teachers who are amazing at all of our buildings. We happen to have 4 terrific teachers in our building who work with kids in a variety of ways and settings, and most of our students know who these teachers are because they are in the classrooms all the time and they're just another teacher who work with certain kids. So it's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's nothing to be afraid of. It's something that we do to make sure that all kids have what they need. So, and also just to keep in mind, an evaluation for those services would never be done without your consent, and specially designed instruction or special education services would never be started without your consent. So those are all things that you are a critical part of the team in deciding if that's a good fit for your kids. There are lots of other things that we can be trying to, like Title I reading and ELP, like a time with our tag teacher, Ms. Fries. If your student is not a native English speaker, then you'll maybe get some beefed up time with their ELL teacher. So there are lots of things that we do for kids who are struggling, and we are keeping an eye on that all the time. That's one of the biggest things that our teachers look at on those Wednesday early out days when we have our PLC collaborative time. We are constantly looking through data and we are looking at what can we do to make sure all kids have what they need. Finally, if you still have questions,